Hi guys, this is Jeff from Railway City Hobbies, and today we're going to do a comparison between the Intermountain and the Scaletrains Tier 4 Gevo. Both models are very nicely done. I'm not playing favorites. Right off the top, I'm not playing favorites for any company. I am a dealer for both, but this is just a general review and comparison between the detail that both locomotives come equipped with. So we'll start with the actual colors of the locomotive. This Intermountain here on the my right, your left. The actual yellow is a closer representation than the Scaletrains would be, but the gray is too dark, and the Scaletrains would, from photos I've seen, is a better representation. The MU boot down here, the train line boot, on some of them I've seen parting lines, and they're a little bit sloppy on the Intermountain, whereas the Scaletrains is clean, crisp, and the thickness is consistent throughout the whole train line. The actual detail, or the handrails on the Scaletrains, are thinner and more realistic, but this comes at a cost, as the thinner they are, the more chances that they would be deformed by heat or would be easier to break. Another thing I'd point out on the Scaletrains, and this is an accuracy, is the actual grab iron going up, the handrail grab iron going up to the through the stairway. At the top of the handrail, they install a plate as part of the actual separately applied grab iron. So the handrail goes to a plate and it's bolted onto the body. This is accurate. The Intermountain is just a pushed in piece of detail. There isn't actually the square plate there on the front. Minor, but rivet counters will pick it up. The windshield itself, both are black gasketed on the outside. Intermountains are tinted, Scaletrains are not. Now this comes down to a question, and I don't know the answer. This is a Ministry of Transportation question, or a Department of Transportation, depending on what country you're from. Like a car windshield, you cannot tint your windshield, because it would affect certain colors, like purple. I know this personally because I had a very tinted vehicle, and at night, purple, you wouldn't actually, like, it was heavily tinted at the back window. I couldn't see a purple car. But anyways, I'm assuming, now this is again assumption, that the windshield cannot be tinted, or very little tinted, like a 90 or 95% tint, where this is quite a bit more tinted. The interior on the Scaletrains is actually more accurate, including the actual speed recorder here. You can see plain as day versus the Intermountains. The headlight, the ditch lights, the actual housings are different. The Intermountains are smaller. The Scaletrains are thicker, but they are, if you can see from the backside, which I won't be able to actually show, that they are angled to follow the walkway, which would, without actually being on the locomotive, I couldn't tell you which was more accurate. I'm assuming that had to have been like accuracy, because why would you? You would just go thin like they did with the Intermountains. Both have treaded front walkways, see-through steps going up the front. Your anti-climber on the front with the sill stripe. KD coupler on the Intermountain. Scaletrain's own proprietary coupler. None of their couplers come with the trip pin. I personally cut them off anyways, so that's my personal opinion. MU hoses look a little bit different. Actually, on the top of the plow, there is actually the lift bar. Take it off. But I didn't actually check and see in the because it looks like there's holes in the top of the plow here. I'll have to check the parts bag and see if there is extra parts to install lift rings or what they would actually use to hook on and take this plow off if necessary. So Intermountain's got the actual detail on here. You can see the two white tabs. That is part of the actual snow plow. MU hoses. MU hoses, the Intermountains are thicker, but they have a white silver tip, where Scaletrains are thinner, but the ends are less pronounced to be in color. The PTC antennas on the top are very, very similar. There is some differences on the actual top, and I can flip it over. This unit here, unfortunately, there is a big glue blob on the top of the locomotive. So we're going to turn it over and we'll demonstrate exactly what we're talking about. Right here, nice sized glue blob. On here you'll see little handles, or grab irons, which are not on the Scaletrains version. But the rest of the antennae, except this one here, this white one here, isn't on the Scaletrains version. We'll see that later on. You got a grab iron at the front, at the top here, grab iron halfway down, labeling all throughout the top of the locomotive. A grab iron here, but it actually is kind of pushed in kind of crooked. The exhaust compartment is just one piece molded in, not open to the inside. Very nice separately applied metal etch detail on the rad fans, or sorry, not rad grills. So now with the Scaletrains. So it doesn't have, on the front here, it doesn't have the grab irons that were shown on the Intermountain. And the antennae is not there, but from photos there is a little tiny antennae right where the end of the pointer is. Again, grab iron here and here and at the front. A lot better, in better condition than the example, but that example may be just a fluke. The exhaust is, you got a silver actual bezel around the actual housing here, and it is open to the inside. And grill work again. It's almost a tie on the grill work, I'd say. The grills look very, very similar. Not much warpage. So we'll give it a tie on that one. Detail wise on the top, Scaletrains has a better exhaust, but there are small little tiny details missing that you would find on the Intermountain. But then again, on top of the actual walkway, like the dimpling is a lot better on the Scaletrains, and the actual depth of the detail on the top of the rad is a lot better than the detail on the Intermountain. I'm just going to grab that just for get the Intermountain back here, and you can see on the top the depth of the detail on the top of the rad. It does have texture, rippled walkway, dimpled walkway. So now to the side of the locomotives. So on the Intermountain, again, the yellow looks more prototypical than the Scaletrains does. The flag, it's not right. The lighting or the shading of the flag, it looks stupid. I'm sorry. I'm going to be very blunt. This could have been done a whole lot better. It's it's just too glossy. You'll see like it just doesn't belong. It doesn't look right at all. The grill, it is metal etched grills on the rear here. A lot tighter grill work than would be on the Scaletrains, which we'll see later. The brake chain is a metal chain, as said in previous reviews, and it's spring loaded here and here, going to the brake cylinder bar into the truck. This becomes a problem. Sorry, I'm going to move my hand because the camera's out of focus. So again, brake chain, springs there and in there. Trying to focus on my hand. This becomes an issue if you've ever worked or had an Atlas Dash 840C, the Dash 840B, pretty much any of the GEs that Atlas did in the 80s, not the 80s, sorry, not the 80s, the 2000s, so the Silver Series. When you ever had to get that rear chain off, to get the body off, you'd usually snap the little hook, or you break it off from one end, then you got to try to glue it back on. Bowser ran into the same issue on the first generation SD40s. When you had to get the shell off for servicing, you broke the chain. Either you broke it from the body, or you broke it from the brake cylinder, and then you had to try to glue it back on, and it sometimes would be just a nightmare to get it back on. So back on track here. Windows are very tinted. You pretty much can't see through the cab from the side. Your dynamic fan intake grills and exhaust grills at the front. Roller bearing trucks in the front. Roller bearing trucks on all axles. And got your brake wheel at the rear. I'm going to have to move it forward again. Brake wheel at the rear. All kinds of warning labels throughout the locomotive. All up the sill. You got like depth molding on these three compartments here. And another more depth molding here. Warning labels all down the sill. Now one discrepancy on the top, on the Intermountain is the color of the nose of the locomotive. From the photos I've seen, and it all depends on lighting, this is too light and the top is too dark. But it could have, whatever photo they may have been using at the time may have led them astray. On the rear of the locomotive, the knuckle coupler is wrong on the Intermountain. The sand filler hatch is actually the most correct version. I'm going to bring the Scaletrains back on to see. So in the rear of the locomotive, you'll notice that the Scaletrains spinner knuckle holder is correct by prototype in appearance. The Scaletrains is not. The sand filler hatch, though, it is actually more accurate on the Intermountain than it would be on the Scaletrains. The neck is longer, but it's at the wrong angle. Again, you can see the difference in the color of the two locomotives. That being a darker kind of a browny gray. This is this looks more like a true UP gray. But again, this yellow is more vibrant than this would be. Again, that looks more prototypical. On the hose again, you see the actual hose on the back is it gets a little chunky at times, and there's a little bit of flash on it, whereas the Scaletrains is consistently the thickness of all the way across. Both have your coupler cut levers, your all the separately applied grabs, your MU hose at the rear. So in that sense, the actual, there's a little bit of difference in the walkway in the rear. Let's see if I can change the camera view here to see it. Should do it. So there's looks like white painting on the surface up here, on the top here. It's a little badly painted, but it's there. And versus it's actually a lot thinner. There's actually a little bit of white at the very top step here. I'm gonna have to turn it completely sideways. Actually, right there. You can see the white on this one. I'm gonna push this one back further. And the white is more predominant, but a little bit more messier on this one. And it's all the way across the step, where it's just on the surface of this first step here. And it is the same on the other side. The painting of the steps on the face of the actual kicks, the face of the steps, is a little sloppy on this one. That being said, this is fine detail work, and we are all human. A human did this. It wasn't a robot that did the painting to this, so errors do happen, unfortunately. The painting on the steps again on the side are a little sloppy, versus it's a lot crisper and cleaner on the edge of the step tread. Now, we were talking about the flag on the Intermountain being it just looks like a dog's breakfast, honestly. The Scaletrains one, it's not without problems itself. The Scaletrains one seems a little bit too dark, but the realism, the actual light shading, the print is a lot better on this. It just seems a little dark from what the photos I've seen. Metal etch grill work at the up in the dynamics. Metal etch grill at the air intake. The grill work in the rear here is more. It's easier to see through. Scaletrains may have done that by design. So it can actually be be a looser hole pattern, so you can actually see through. But I can't tell. I don't know the actual gauge of this, what it should be. But representation-wise, this is a better representation. It's a lot nicer looking than the Intermountain's version. Even though they are both metal etch see-through, I'd give this a better grade than what Intermountain did. A big difference is the underbody detail. On this, you can see lots and lots of electrical piping, plumbing underneath the sill, going from one end to the other. And in the actual detail, like in the actual just above the fuel tank, there is a lot more detail on the two air tanks and the the air valve in there. A lot better detail on this than there would be than what Intermountain has. We're going to show that right now. They do have some detail, but they don't have near as much detail as the Scaletrains edition does. In the front here, you can see the two horizontally louvered battery boxes on this Intermountain versus the Scaletrains version. More pronounced etching, or more pronounced louvers on the doors on this locomotive. The fuel tank itself, it looks, both the Intermountains and Scaletrains are very similar in the detail. They both have the sight glasses, the fill neck, and I believe that would be the shutoff. So in detail purposes, you can go either way, depending on what you look for in your locomotive. Personally, the Scaletrains edition does have better detail than the Intermountain does. Another big feature that the Scaletrains has over top of the Intermountain is they use a version 4 sound decoder, and it also comes with a capacitor. You call it a keep alive, current keeper, depending on what brand you want to call it. They use that on this here. Lighting wise, the Intermountain has the walkway light in the front here. Right there. Scaletrains put that detail there, but it is actually not a functioning light. As for the number boards, they're both lit. Intermountain, they use both. They use LED lighting for the pilot light and in the ditch lights. As the Scaletrains, they are all LED, and the number boards are all LED. Separately applied wipers on both, grab irons, separately applied grab irons, and filler hatches. Not much difference in the grab irons. The Intermountain look a tad thicker than the Scaletrains version. As in previous videos, the Scaletrains does weigh more than the Intermountain, and the pulling capacity is greater on the Scaletrains than it is on the Intermountain. As for running ability, they are very comparable, both smooth and quiet running locomotives. I didn't in the test when I tested these the CN units, they were very comparable in speed control because they both use lock sound decoders, this being a select and this being a version 4. The Intermountain edition, the sound edition, they have a little bit different setup on the sound, whereas they do have the smart shutdown option on the prime mover. So if it sits for the preset time, there's 2 preset times that is available through Intermountain through ESU. That if it sits for, I think it's 5 minutes, and then the actual prime mover shuts down automatically and will not start back up until you give it throttle, and then it will actually go through its full startup sequence, and then it will move. Then it will respond to whatever speed step you put the locomotive to. That was a big mouthful. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the locomotives set up so we can listen to the sound of each one of them, and so we can hear the sounds with the actual locomotive, the horn, the bell, and the actual prime mover. So we'll get it set up on the track and we'll be right back. Alright, so now we're going to look at the lighting on the Scaletrains, which is on the left, the 2610. Just gotta turn the power on, be helpful. So there's the headlight and the ditch light. And actually, one second. Alright, so now we have the lights off. The 2610, there's the lighting on that. And so now we'll turn the lighting off. And we'll grab locomotive 2640. and turn on its lights as well. So we'll start up the prime mover on the Intermountain. And now we're going to shut it down. And we're going to start up the 2610, the Scaletrains. So now it's up at idle. And we'll do a shutdown. Now it comes down to personal preference, which sound you prefer. I prefer the Scaletrains just because of the dual sugar cube speakers in the back that give a little bit crisper and clearer sound, where it doesn't sound crackly, or the actual prime mover, well, it's not like well, it was throttle up, like the chug sound was more pronounced on the Scaletrains. But that's a personal preference again. So this concludes the comparison. They all have, both locomotives have done really well, and they tooled up brand new stuff. Intermountain has stepped up and produced a better running product than previous times, most notably about the ES44 and its pulling capability. And Intermountain is addressing that in the Dash 9s that are upcoming. In detail, I say this is personal opinion, my humble opinion. Some will tell me wrong. Yeah, Intermountain, the rear brake chain, is nice, but the color on the top of the top and bottom, it looks more like a brownie gray than it would be like the UP gray. You can see it clearly, like you'll see, as you can see in this picture, this lighting, you can see it really stand out quite a ways here. But it comes down to your personal preference, and sometimes it comes down to brand loyalty. Everyone's used the whole Ford, Chevy, Dodge thing. Some people, they're just brand loyal to one brand. But as for the addition, you can't go wrong. Now in the DC, if you're looking at a CN or a BNSF that have the rear ditch lights, and you're a DC customer, the Intermountain is a better choice, just simply because they do install a lock pilot in it, which allows the the lock pilot actually it has the ability to control the rear ditch lights in DC mode, whereas the Scaletrains, the rear ditch lights do not function in DC mode, just because the DC jumper doesn't have the capability to handle that. Intermountain does have the walkway light, which is nice. It's a nice little feature. But the UP flag, not the UP flag, the U.S. the United States American flag, it looks disgraceful. But that's my opinion. Again, everyone else will have an opinion, and there's no right or wrong answer. Both locomotives are pretty equal in pulling ability. The Scaletrains has a little bit more capability, but both are top of their grade essentially compared to what's out there now. Both these locomotives will outpull anything that's out there, unless you're using traction tires or frog snot to increase your traction. So that being said, when you're looking at a locomotive, you gotta look at its features and capability. Yeah, Scaletrains does have the capacitor that Intermountain doesn't have, but Intermountain has the smart shutdown on. You can actually go in and change your CVs, so you could have the smart shutdown versus Scaletrains that doesn't have that option. There's a lot to think about which one is better, but it comes down to, again, I've said it and I'm beating a dead horse, it comes down to personal opinion, which one you find right. I've had customers and people tell me the sound file sounds right and it sounds wrong, and then others tell me completely different. Oh, I hear it differently, and I heard this locomotive and it sounds better. Tsunami or TCS done a better sound file. No right or wrong answer. Just comes down to what you're happy with, what sound file sounds better to you, and which one is the best representation in your mind of the locomotive. Both were done really well. Lots of separately applied detail, grab irons, grill work, lots and lots of metal etch parts on both of these locomotives. You can't go wrong either way. Just it comes down to personal preference. I'd like to thank you for watching this video. Happy modeling.